home, wherever, or when you're using spaces like this, you are not subjected to abductions. You are not subjected to threats like I've been receiving every day telling me that they are going to, quote unquote, deport me back to Canada, or they are coming for me, or that Ruto did me a favor by simply respecting court orders and the Constitution to allow me to return to my country of birth. This is, in a nutshell, what is happening today. It has accumulated for many decades. Between 2017 and 2022, if many people recall, Uhuru Kenyatta did the same thing. He turned his guns on the people. He was abducting Kenyans. Many of them, their bodies were found in River Yala. Many of them disappeared up to today. And we know people were tortured. Personally, my house was bombed. They abducted me just the same way they've been abducting people at night when I was sleeping. Vanished with me, tortured me, and forced me out of the country. This is the context. So when the Gen Zs come onto the streets, we should not lose that historical context, that the grievances are not new, that this culture of impunity that Ruto now exemplifies, the refusal to listen to the people, the runaway corruption, the plunder that does not know limits, the arrogance that you see when D posts on X, and when Farouk and Sudi go to Harambes every week and purport to donate tens of millions of public money that they have stolen. Farouk Kibet does not hold any public office, but can donate on every weekend Harambee 10 million shillings. Sudi's salary is 1 million shillings, but he can donate 20 million every weekend. These are public money. When Kenyans see Ruto walking around with a watch worth 30 million shillings, many watches, and shoes of 2 million, and takes a private jet to the US that is purportedly worth 200 million, does not account for any of this. When Ruto cries that Uhuru Kenyatta left an empty coffers at Treasury, but instead of going for the people that looted the Treasury and left the coffers empty so that they can pay the so-called debts that Kenyans did not consent to them taking, he then turns around and overtaxes Kenyans. The same Kenyans that are unemployed, the same Kenyans who cannot afford 3 meals a day, the same Kenyans that is brutalizing. This is the trigger. Finance Bill 2024, which is an IMF World Bank project, was simply a trigger based on the historical grievances that Kenyans have had for all this time. It was also precipitated by the fact that even though the Constitution ended, at least legally, the imperial presidency, the president has refused to recognize the constitutional limits. For instance, he's using the power of the presidency that is limited in the Constitution to emasculate parliament, and has emasculated parliament completely through bribery, through CDF, which the courts have declared illegal, through threats like that of Kibet Farouk, through kidnappings or abductions, and through bribery. He has also emasculated the judiciary, again, through the same mechanisms. So the legislative arm of government and the judicial arm of government have been turned into extensions of State House. The executive is now engaged in impunity. They do things without restraint. The victims of injustices, the victims of Kenyans who have been abducted, Kenyans who have been tortured, Kenyans who have been murdered or extrajudicially killed, have not received justice. Ruto has not even spent 1 minute expressing his condolences. So in other words, we have had unbridled arrogance of public officers, including the president, that has exploded into the protests. People, I believe about 65% of Kenya's population is unemployed. These people are on the street because, number one, they don't even have anything to do. They don't have anything to do because the state has failed. The government has failed to take care of them. Ruto was saying the other day that he wants to export manual laborers to Germany and other places. And many of us are saying, no, the reasons Kenyans elected you is to create employment in Kenya so that these young people, these unemployed, can contribute to the development of the country in Kenya, not going outside to become slaves and to be mistreated in Saudi Arabia and many other places. So, what is the way forward? From what we have seen in the last 1.5 weeks, William Ruto is not interested in accepting the fact that the people have rejected what he has been doing for the last 2 years. Why do I say that? Number one, the abductions are continuing. Today you saw that they abducted the former MP from his own region, Mr. Alfred Keter, in broad daylight, in front of his children and wife, coming from a church. So that's not a contrite and reasonable leader. That's not a democratic leader. That's not a leader who is listening. Because what is it that Keter has been doing? Keter has been using his X space to challenge Ruto, to question him, to interrogate him, to express his opinions pursuant to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights gives him that, give him those rights. But Ruto does not respond reasonably. If Keter had done anything wrong, if Keter had committed any crime, there is a way to summon someone to the DCI or to arrest them humanely, in a dignified way, legally, by 2 policemen appearing at home and telling him that he's under arrest. I don't think that you would resist. But here he's being abducted on the streets, just like many Kenyans have been abducted and disappeared. Number 2, he unilaterally purported to have withdrawn, quote unquote. I use quote unquote because the bill has not been withdrawn. He purports that he withdrew Finance Bill 2024 and that he sent it back to the House. The law does not allow him to do that. The law simply allows him to reject the bill with a memo back to the House on what it is that he thinks should be amended or not amended. But he cannot unilaterally withdraw the entire bill. He's not allowed to do that by law, so he's just claiming that he did that. But why did he wait until too late? Some of us, I, for example, since 2023, I told him to withdraw Finance Bill 2023. It's a matter of public record. I also told him to withdraw Finance Bill 2024 before it was presented to the House, before it was debated, before it was passed. Kenyans demanded, even on the day of rage on Thursday, when a few gallant youth stormed Parliament, they wanted Parliament not to preside over the passage of the bill. Ruto refused. Why did it take so many lives lost for him to purport, to reject, to sign the bill into law? And more importantly, Ruto, 2 days ago, signed the Appropriation Bill 2024 that authorizes him to spend billions, hundreds of billions of public money. The question is, what Ruto care about? The money that he's supposed to spend and loot, or the taxes? Because he's still taxing under the Finance Bill 2023 anyway. The taxes as of today are excessive anyway. They are punitive anyway. And those taxes are continuing anyway. If you go anywhere else in Kenya today, you will be taxed. So nobody is saying the withdrawal or the refusal or the rejection of Finance Bill 2024 has solved anything. It hasn't. And then it has not stopped Ruto from spending the hundreds of billions. The spending, the illegal expenditures continue. The stealing continue. The ostentatious spending continue. The abductions continue. The extrajudicial killings continue, which means Ruto is telling Kenyans, go to hell. He's putting his middle finger and flashing it to Kenyans. The last point. Ruto then purports yesterday and unilaterally announced that he has constituted some consultation or consultative youth engagement without reference to the people, without reference to the grievances, without knowing or understanding or appreciating the fact that the demonstrations was a vote of no confidence on the street pursuant to section clause 1 of the Constitution against his regime. He's not contrite. He called the protesters criminals. He said the criminals had infiltrated and had done all manner of things. But it is Ruto's goons, the police, the killer squads that are not dressed in police uniform, killing people on the streets. So this is the context. We are saying Ruto is incorrigible. Ruto has become ungovernable and must be brought to account. And the people of Kenya have a right under clause 1 of the Constitution to bring him to account. They can do that on the street. They don't have to do that through parliament because parliament has been captured. Those suggesting that we go to court are missing the point completely. Law is an instrument of power, not the other way around. I studied law. Law serves the state. Law does not serve the citizens. The primary purpose of law is to serve the state. That is why the state enacts the laws. The citizens don't enact the laws. So, and the courts, the judges are employees of the state. The state pay them. The state protect them through weapons and muzzlemen. And the state can threaten them, can intimidate them, can bribe them, and are doing that already. That is how come a judge ratified the illegal deployment of the military on the streets. We don't have martial law in Kenya. We don't have a military dictatorship in Kenya, or at least we should not have. But we have the military on the streets. Ironically, we have a deployment of 2,000 police officers in Haiti. They are saying we don't need them in Kenya, but we need them in Haiti. But in Kenya, we need the military on the roads. So what is the way forward? Ruto expects Kenyans to be confused, Kenyans to be divided, Kenyans and Gen Zs, or particularly Gen Zs, to say this is our movement. Nobody should speak about this movement. Nobody should purport to be a leader. Nobody should give us direction. They want that because they know that the staying power of any unorganized group is maximum of 2 weeks. So they are waiting. They are waiting for them to infiltrate. They are waiting for them to buy a few of the patriots. They are waiting to compromise them. They are waiting to use them to reach them through their parents. They are waiting to basically for them to die through attrition. They are also waiting for them to start being opportunistic and fighting against each other and making contradictory demands. They know that they have the NIS, they have the DCI, they have the military intelligence, they have the bureaucracy, they have the CIA, they have the intelligence of the British. They have all this institutional firepower against just discontented citizens. So they expect the discontented citizens to be confused. We cannot allow ourselves to be confused. And I say ourselves because this struggle does not belong to any generation. This is a struggle for all Kenyans. It cannot be a struggle for one generation. The problems we are facing affect all Kenyans. Overtaxation affects all Kenyans. Tyranny affects all Kenyans. Keter that they abducted today is not a Jay-Z. Is not a Generation Z. So we know that he wants to divide us. So we cannot allow that. So our demands, in my respectful opinion, can only be one. Ruto and his entire regime must go. They must resign now. Because they are not capable, they are unable, they are unwilling, and it is not in their best interest to resign. They will not do it willingly. All right? Power does not concede without resistance. Power does not concede without a fight. Nobody exercising the kind of power Ruto has will surrender without a fight. So he will not throw in the towel on his own. He will not concede to the extent that what he does is inimical to his existence. In other words, if Ruto were to surrender today and gave in to everything, which then makes his survival as a head of state and a head of government and his so-called re-election prospects almost zero, he will not do that. And we know right now it is almost zero. It is now that we must demand that he resigns because he is at his weakest point. He cannot leave to State House and go anywhere. He cannot even go abroad and waste our money. He cannot go to church anymore. His wife could not even go to church this weekend. He could not go to church and leave without people chasing after him. His MPs cannot walk freely in Kenya. His ministers cannot talk anywhere. We have them, as they say, by the scrotum. If you stop squeezing, you give this maniac the ability to come back and consume everyone. They have already identified each one of us. So all they will need to do is come and pick each one of you one by one and disappear with you and nothing happens. Our strength is in our numbers. Once you gather in huge numbers, other than him being vicious and hiring snipers, there's nothing else he can do. And right now, he's at a corner. The ICC is watching. The international community is watching. The UN already told him that he cannot abuse Kenyans. The press is all over him. Ruto is at his weakest point. This is the time to go for the kill. If we don't do it now, he will recover. And he will defeat everything that we are fighting for. Now, people said, so what happens after he resigns? I had proposed something very, very simple. We set up, and I'm not saying people have to agree to this, but it can be debated and people have to tell me what other better ideas they have. We set up an independent, a national transitional authority, which is voluntary, of 54 professional volunteers, comprising youth, men and women of integrity from all nationalities, all religious backgrounds. 54 because we are about 54 communities. So no community to be left out of this transitional council because it has to represent transitional authority because it must represent everyone. Small and big communities represented equally. This authority will up an independent investigative authority to investigate all questionable land transactions, corruption scandals, allegations of all institutional and individual abuses, political assassinations from 1963 to present. This has not been done before. This is equivalent to the Nuremberg process in Germany after the Nazis were defeated. All right? When Hitler was defeated, a process was set into place. The third thing that we need to set up, which this National Transitional Authority will do, is to reconstitute the IEBC within 2 weeks. You cannot allow Ruto to reconstitute the IEBC. That would be stupid, because the people he will be putting there will be people that will be serving his interests for 2027. That is exactly the problem that people had in 1992, after Moi allowed the multi-partyism, or in 2002, when Kibaki took power, or in 2018, after the National Accord was put into place. We allowed politicians with vested interest to nominate their own people that will serve their own interests. The result will exactly be what we have now, or worse. The elections of 2027 will not be democratic because we will have vested interest controlling the process. These bodies will be the ones, once the investigations complete, once the prosecutions continue and proceed, that you will have a transformed judiciary. You will have a transformed IEBC. You will have a transformed national and county political systems. And we will be completely liberated. And this can be done. The elections can be held in 3 months. People think that elections are a very complicated thing. India organizes elections in 1 month. And India is the most populous country in the world. And they have more than 2.5 billion people. I mean, Britain just announced an election. They're holding it in a month. France held elections in 3 weeks. Elections are not the most complicated things. And in fact, Rosalina Kombe, who is listening and is part of this discussion, and produced a report because she was part of the IEBC in 2017, has recommended on a report I have posted on my handle at page 7 to 12, what it is that requires to be done with the IEBC. She's saying, and she's been there, you cannot have a government in power that has abused power, that has been alleged to have stolen elections, that have looted money, that controls all levels of power, to reconstitute the IEBC. You would be a fool. It's like telling